Jessica, once you told me about a story about a grown up gentleman coming into the office and he had tears in his eyes. And he is one of your tenants. He used to be one of your tenants. Why was he crying? Why did he come to see you?
He came to see me after going to an open inspection. So he was looking for another rental property. After 4 years of being our tenant in the one property, the owners were needing to move back into their property, which is rightfully so. So they were given a notice to vacate, but with the current times, he was struggling to find a rental property.
Mm-hmm. So he was a family man, or?
Yes, yep. So he was a father with children. So mum, dad, kids in the property. So family, very family orientated, very gentle soul. Perfect tenants, absolutely perfect tenants. And he came that day with tears in his eyes because when he went to that inspection, the real estate agent holding the inspection laughed at him and said, "You keep showing up to all of my inspections," and laughed in his face. And he was devastated because they had applied for over 70 properties at that point in time.
So he applied for 70 properties and he could not get a rental after applying for 70. And then the real estate agent who was conducting this rental inspection saw him come into one of his inspection and laughed at him.
He laughed at him because he had come to many open inspections for different properties through that agency.
What would you think about an agent actually laughing at another prospective tenant? How do you see this?
I think that's it's very disrespectful. It's disheartening that somebody would do that, because if somebody's showing up to multiple inspections and applied for your property, now I know exactly what that application looks like. I have copies of that application that they were putting through. Mm-hmm. I have their rental ledger. I've been their property manager for over 4 years and their rent has never been late. There's copies of their routine inspections. The house is always kept clean, neat and tidy. They are not troublesome tenants. There was no VCAT hearings. There was no notices other than the one notice to vacate when the owners were moving in. And if I received an application like that, I would have put them in the property straight away if we had one.
You can't, because you're not the owner.
That's right, I'm not the owner. That's right. So it comes down to the owner's decision. But I would be letting that owner know, like, you know, the positives of this application. In my opinion, seeing that application, there's nothing wrong with the application, but there was just such a shortage of rentals. We're receiving 30 plus applications for properties. It can only go to one person. But for the agent to laugh at them for turning up to multiple inspections, it's disgusting.
Beyond despicable.
Yeah.
That's what I would say.
Yeah.
See, why people face this problem? I mean, what happened to this guy? Why? I mean, I think I know this gentleman. I think I know this tenant, right? I think it's a family man. He got, I think, 2-3 kids, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But they've been very nice, very respectable, respectful tenants, and paid on time, like you said. And they had to leave. What was the reason?
So the owner was moving back into the property. That was going to become the owner's primary residence. So that is happening a lot at the moment. With interest rates and everything going up, people are selling their main residence, moving into their investment properties, things like that. It is happening all the time. And so therefore the tenants had to vacate through no fault of their own.
What do you feel when people go through these type of things? Do you think who can actually help these people? Because I don't know, I can't help. I don't know a way to help these type of, I mean, we don't have always rental properties available for each and every tenants, right? And do you see a bit of a downfall in rental properties in the market? That not much is available at the moment?
There's more demand than there is available. Like I said, for properties, we're receiving 30 plus applications. It can only go to one person.
Do you have any idea why there is this much of a rental demand? What are the reasons you think, in your opinion?
In my opinion, I think interest rates do have a bit to do with it. So people are struggling to be able to maintain their primary residence and an investment property, and therefore are selling one of their properties. And
a first home buyer would buy it?
A first home buyer would buy it. we also have things like the minimum standards in investment properties now for rental properties, which is a good thing, that they should meet a certain standard. But if somebody's investment property is an older property, the expenses they're going to pay to bring it up to the minimum standard is not necessarily going to be recovered from the rent that they've got coming in, and again, they can't afford.
And they start selling.
So they start selling. Yeah.
Let me add something to you. I was conducting a lot of sales inspections, right? So normally back in the day when I'm doing sales inspections, it's normal for us to ask, are you upsizing, downsizing, or are you researching the market, or are you looking for investment property, because we want to know about the purchaser, their motive, why they want to buy it. I did not have I don't know whether even I had one or two buyers come in and asking a property for investment purpose. Every single one of them were like either upsizing, either downsizing, or they were, first home buyers buying it.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, because I sometimes have this thing in my mind, okay, there are these tenants who are waiting for, because I have heaps of tenants keep calling me, texting me, been in this industry for a long time, asking for properties, and I'm thinking in my head, okay, if an investor buy this property, I have
got
already
a list of tenants, yeah,
lots of tenants to put them. But unfortunately, every single purchasers do happen to be like a first home buyer, or maybe upsizer, downsizer, and I'm like, wow, what's going on?
I think the other thing that is happening is people that they can no longer afford the mortgage repayments are also now becoming tenants. So you're adding those people into a pool of people already looking for that are long-term renters, or and are vacating for whatever reasons. They're also upsizing, downsizing. Renters are, if they're expanding their family or things are happening. If the price goes up, they're looking to maybe get a smaller place and things like that. But then you've also got all the people who can no longer afford the repayments on their houses, are selling that house and becoming renters.
So there are new laws also inducted into this management side, yeah? Rentals, new things. So when did these new laws started coming in?
So they've been now in place for 2 years. So they became effective. Yep. So there's lots of new things. So the minimum standards is one. Compliance checks, I think we've spoken about before, are another that also must be done. But it is a good thing for the most part. It is a very good thing, because it means these properties should have less problems when it comes to maintenance. If they're being maintained, they've got to meet a certain standard. They've got to be maintained at a certain standard. Then we should see less breakdown of things.
What is your honest feeling towards the rental providers? I mean, these hard-working people who put 20% deposit to buy a house, and now they're offering it to somebody else to come and live. And do you think currently the way, even the taxes, I think you aware, we have investors has to pay a lot of capital gain tax, as well as if they have a lot of land tax and everything. What do you feel about them? Do you think it's fair what they have to face?
No, I think they're suffering. So if somebody, especially if we're talking about not big time investors, but like you said, those that have their primary residence and have purchased another house to provide a home for another person, they're not necessarily big time investors, and they're working very hard to be able to do that. And when these things are happening, like I said, with the interest rates and taxes and things like that, it's not something they can then maintain. And this majority of the phone calls I get throughout the day are two things. One, like you mentioned before, is renters looking for properties, and the other is the owners, the rental providers.
They sell and they also becoming tenants now.
Well, that's one thing, but the other thing is, when can they put a rent increase through to their tenants? Because they're no longer on a fixed term rate, their interest rates have gone up, they can no longer afford it. Can we do a rent increase? And rent increases can only happen once every 12 months.
And I heard there's a rumor, they said the government going to stop rental providers putting their rental increment up for 2 years. Is it in place yet or not?
No, it's not in place yet, but that is something that was being discussed. And that is because the rent is increasing significantly at the moment.
But that increasing, Jessica, because of the interest rates are
Of course,
increasing.
yes, because the
I feel
payments
sorry
need to come
for
as well. It's a very hard situation for both, and like I said, so when this happens, so when you've got these owners that are wanting to increase the rent because they're trying to cover the mortgage because of their interest rates, they're sending through the rent increase to the tenants. Now, rent increases have always happened. Every 12 months or every 2 years, it's quite normal for a rent increase to happen. But the amount that it's increasing by now, the renters
Obscene.
can't afford it.
I know.
I have sent through one, and the thing is, in Victoria, there is no limit on it, which is, I think, why they're trying to put through a 2-year ban on increasing. So,
But I don't find that as a solution, Jessica, because
well,
think
we
about
can't.
it. Like,
So one thing we can't do is you can't just send through an astronomical rent increase to somebody without a reason. So when we're sending through that rent increase notice, so we send through the appraisal to the owner, and the appraisal, for those that aren't aware, is a comparative market appraisal, which means you're comparing similar properties in the market that are currently rented or on the market to be rented within 2 kilometres with similar conditions. So you're not comparing a 1-bedroom apartment to a 2-story, 5-bedroom, 3-bathroom house. Okay, you're comparing similar to similar age properties. So when you're sending through the rent increase notice and getting the advice from the owner of what they're wanting to increase to, you need to be able to back it up with similar properties. So you can't just put, a property that was paying $400 a week, you can't just send, no, you've got to pay $700 a week now, with no evidence of it. You've got to send the rent increase notice, giving 60 days notice of it, and you've got to send through relevant information to support that rent increase, that is what the current market is. So then what happens is, 1, everybody agrees, and the rent increase goes ahead, whatever it's going to be. 2, they might try to negotiate it. It might be a matter of only changing it $10 less or something like that, and everybody's happy with that. The other is, which is what we are finding does happen quite a bit depending on the amount of increase, is those tenants are then vacating because they can no longer afford the rent of that property. But then what happens is when we re-advertise that property, we are advertising it at that rent increase price, or potentially even higher, because it is within the range of what is being advertised in that area.
see, now I honestly feel sorry for all parties.
All parties,
I feel
it's
sorry
very
for the hard-working landlords, and I mean, now we call them rental providers, because
Yeah.
I mean, they're not being villains here, in my
No,
opinion.
they're not.
Why they putting their rents up? I mean, these increments, simply because they have to, I mean, pay their mortgage.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Facilitate the mortgage. So how they going to pay it? They can't pay so much out of their pocket.
Yep.
And then tenants, I feel sorry for them. They're losing their rental properties because they cannot pay for it, the amount they're asking. And I got no idea. I think some kind of an authority really have to look into this disaster. I mean, people, it's a beautifully developed country that we are living. And it's appalling what is happening to all these people, because
Yeah.
we are in the middle, right? You and I'm in the middle, and you're you're property manager, and you're probably dealing with a lot of heartbreaks like this,
It's very heartbreaking to hear it from both sides of how everybody is struggling and how everybody is also trying to make it fair and reasonable. But the main goal is everybody wants to keep a roof over their heads, and it's becoming harder and harder to do. And one thing I have noticed, which some landlords are starting to accept this idea as maybe being a way forward, is that sometimes we have, say, 4 applications come through for a property, okay, and it's 2 couples. So it might be a 4-bedroom house. Now, individually, they could not afford the property on their own. A couple of years ago, they could. But what's happened is both parties have received rent increases. They might be friends, they might be cousins, or one party, and their respective partners, and they're then applying for a property together. So they're going to share the
I think
property
this is
together.
happening a lot now.
Now, this isn't such a bad idea, especially you've got 2 adult couples,
Yeah.
all 4 are working, you've got 4 incomes coming in.
Yeah. I totally get what you say, but think about it. It's good to, alleviate their stress out of the income, I mean the expenditure. But Jessica, people, it's a developed country, it's a beautiful country that we don't want to actually get into a house with other people,
No,
right?
you want your privacy,
Because what's it gonna happen to the
that's
privacy?
something that we are seeing though as a way for people to be able to afford
I mean,
properties.
how
Is that we're
sad that
resorting
could
to.
be. Like, people have to go through nowadays to live in this country. I mean, especially in Victoria, so where we live, and this is where we know about things are happening. Imagine that people have to incorporate other families into their house.
Yeah.
I mean, that is one of the hardest thing on the planet, to live with other people. I mean, I can't do it.
Nope.
I rather live in my car if I have to come to such a circumstance, you know. But I'm feeling very, very, very sad for everybody at the moment, and I do not know why this is happening in this country like this. Do not want to be so political in this chat we are having, because people can understand, but there are authorities who should come up with a better solution for this. Don't you think so?
I agree. Yeah.
Because what do you think if this continues for another year or two? What would happen, in your opinion?
I think you will start seeing a lot more homelessness. I mean, I've received phone calls from people saying that they're living in their car, you know, families living in their car or spread out between different family member houses while they're applying for properties because they've done the right thing by vacating according to a notice to vacate, or couldn't afford the rent increase. So gave notice that they were vacating so that they wouldn't become in arrears or be breaching that notice to vacate, and they're then staying with family members. So like I said, if we are providing a 60-day notice to vacate because the owner is selling the property or moving into a property, like general reasons, 60 days used to be plenty of time. That's 2 months. You know, if you apply for one property a day, that's 60 properties. But at the moment, it's not enough.
And the other thing is, Jessica, you know, I was an international student a long time ago, and I have a bit of soft spot for those international students who come here, because they work very hard, they have to study, and the amount they have to pay for their school fees a lot, right? And then they have this increased high rent to pay.
Yeah.
And you imagine how they feel right now, and they're losing properties. But do you have any kind of an advice to give to these students who come to this country? If they do happen to have a property, what would you say to them? Because we have a lot of viewers from international students. Like, should
They're already renting a property or applying
if they
for a
already
property?
have a property, how careful they should be before they let their rental property to go and get another one?
Well, if we're talking about if they've received a rent increase and they're considering vacating, what they need to be looking at is if they were to leave, one, that there's not a lot of properties available. Two, if they're going to be staying in the same area looking for a similar property, are they going to be paying that price of the rent increase anyway? Or the other thing that they can do is perhaps bring another person in with the consent of the owner. So in that circumstance, what happens is they provide us the details, if it was through our company or another company, and the property managers or the owners would have the new person fill out an application form, and with the owner's consent, they could potentially add another person into the property.
Now, you have so much, I mean, vast amount of experience in this field, right? Since 2016 or 17, you've been doing this rental management. How many heartbreaking stories you came across?
Many. Yep.
Many.
So we have to remember that we did this through COVID as well. So COVID was when lots of people were losing their jobs on both sides. So the rental providers and the renters. You know, we had people having to work from home, children couldn't go to school. So every day was phone calls of heartbreaking stories of what people were going through, you know, being stuck inside their homes, not being able to see family members. Like you mentioned, we've got many international students and also owners that have family overseas, and they would normally go and visit.
So how
once a
do
year.
you feel when you feel so sad for a tenant or let's say even a rental provider, but you cannot do anything? They're helpless and you cannot provide any help. How you deal with it?
Sometimes it is tough. I mean, I'm a very, very calm person. But sometimes it is tough to hear what people are going through. and to try and convey that to the other party. So whether that's the rental provider or the renter, and whilst they are understanding of maybe the other person's circumstances, sometimes it's just the way it is, and people just have to wait things out sometimes. You know, I am not above the law, I am not above the legislation, and I have to work accordingly. And I will sit there and I will listen, and I will provide whatever advice I can provide, or help or suggestion, but I'm not above the law.
Okay. My last question to you, and I'm going to end this conversation after that. Let's say we give you the supreme power and the authority to make things right. What would you do? I know it's a tough question. You don't really have to answer. If you say you don't know, that's fine. But if you have,
I'm not going to answer respectfully, because, as I mentioned, COVID just before, that has significantly delayed some things. Okay, so, and I'm very quickly going to mention VCAT, and if anybody is in the process of waiting for a VCAT hearing, they will be aware that, you know, a normal application process is approximately 8 weeks, depending on what it is for. There are some differences there, but we have a couple of cases pending that are well over a year. I've got one that's been lodged in 2019, still waiting for that hearing. So whilst we follow the legislation, we can do everything accordingly, and we are sympathetic to all parties' situations. Some things we have no control over. And if I did have the power, if I did have the power to be able to have those situations sorted quicker, absolutely, I would be doing that.
So you would make the process and progress in VCAT pretty expeditiously. That's what you're saying.
Exactly.
That's what you would
At the same time, you know, they're dealing with thousands and thousands.
If you had such a superpower, would you want to drop the interest rate?
Of course I would.
Come on, that's one of the biggest things. I think we need to drop the interest rate down and actually maybe reduce the land tax, please, if you can.
Of course.
You know, thank you so much, Jessica, for joining with this, and I think my viewers would get an understanding, and I mean, I hope they get full comprehension over all these what's happening, that we real estate agents, we property managers, we are in the middle, right? Because there's always two parties: rental providers, tenants, vendors, purchases. But I do not have much of a problem when it comes to sales. Sales are happening, but only thing is vendors has to understand what is the market, what they're going to get. But other than that, the tough part is you are handling at the moment, listening to everyone's sad stories and trying to sort everyone's problem. But what I would tell, I mean, my opinion is the relevant authorities has to do something fastly, and also they have to do it pretty effectively, and they have to come up with a strategy, because they shouldn't let this go this far. Because why I say that, I tell you something, the amount of people now moving out of, not just from Victoria to another state, but a lot of people now moving out of this country too. I'm talking about not these young people who coming into this country, the people who lived in this country like you are, who born here, you know, and people who were living for a longer time now do happen to leave the country. And it is not only happening to here. I even met people from Canada, USA, and England, many countries. Now they're actually relocating themselves into countries like Vietnam, Thailand, because something not good is happening. Anyway, thank you so much. I had to let Jessica go because it's very hard to catch Jessica for a video like this, because she's super busy. I let her go back to her work. I'm telling you guys, we both been in this business since 2016, right? I was involved with rental, not as much as Jessica, but I was there with her. Amount of sad things we do happen to hear, and we had to help people is a lot. And now what's happening, you or me, we both not happy how people are suffering. So anyways, there is a lot more I want to ask you, but I will leave it for another day. So thank you so much for joining with us. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Bye for now. Oh goodness.